Broadcasting from New York City to the world, it's the G-Man Interviews.
Welcome. On December 6th of this year, Salon.com published an article entitled How the Right Tried to Ruin Nelson Mandela. The following is an excerpt from the article. The CIA was instrumental in Mandela's 1962 arrest. South Africa was a source of great anxiety for the American government in the heyday of the Cold War. Fearful of Soviet influence and of the prospect that the Western-friendly apartheid regime might lose control, the intelligence community took an active interest in the country. Working with a person inside the African National Congress, of which Mandela was then a leader, the CIA obtained the information necessary to locate and arrest Mandela. Reagan vetoed the 1986 Anti-Apartheid Bill, which called for harsh sanctions against South Africa. Immoral and utterly repugnant were the words he used to describe the proposed sanctions. Congress ultimately overrode the veto. Sanctions were ultimately lifted when apartheid ended, but without the help of a Wyoming congressman named Dick Cheney, who defended the vote even decades later. Reagan also placed Mandela on the terrorist watch list. Echoing the positions of South Africa's apartheid regime, Reagan officially recognized the African National Congress as a terrorist organization. There, Mandela remained until 2008. Jeff Cohen joins us to discuss the CIA's role in removing Mandela from power. Mr. Cohen co-founded the online activist group rootsaction.org in 2011, which has launched a petition drive calling for the CIA to release its files on Nelson Mandela. He is founding director of the Park Center for Independent Media at Ithaca College, where he is an associate professor of journalism. His latest book is Cable News Confidential: My Misadventures in Corporate Media. He has been a commentator at CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC, and was senior producer of MSNBC's Phil Donahue primetime show until it was terminated 3 weeks before the Iraq invasion. Cohen founded the media watch group FAIR in 1986. Thank you for being here, Mr. Cohen.
It's very nice to be with you.
The CIA's involvement in Mandela's arrest may come as a surprise to many listening to this interview. What has rootsaction.org uncovered that warrants a deeper analysis of the case files?
Well, there have been reports in the media since the 1980s from good sources that the CIA played the essential role in the capture of Nelson Mandela in 1962. That we have a former South African intelligence officer, former CIA official that have said this to places like the Cox News Service. They've talked to Johannesburg newspaper. They've been interviewed by Newsweek. And over the years, the story has been told that the CIA had a high-level undercover agent inside the African National Congress and its closely allied group, the South African Communist Party. And with this infiltrator, the CIA was able to discover where Nelson Mandela was on the lam in 1962, where he was going to be at a certain time, and that he was going to be disguised as a chauffeur. And the CIA notified the South African authorities. They were there when Mandela arrived, and sure enough, he was dressed as a chauffeur. So there have been very serious mainstream news reports across the continent, from South Africa to New York, that have quoted close sources saying that CIA officials were boasting about the role they played the day of the arrest and the day, I think also the day after the arrest of Mandela. So when the United States Central Intelligence Agency has this reported role in the arrest of one of the most beloved and most respected and most well-known political prisoners in the history of the world, that's why Roots Action has called upon President Obama to get all the CIA files regarding Mandela in 1962 and release it to the public. So there's absolutely no justification for the CIA claiming that these files have to be secret. 50 years have passed. There's obviously not a threat to any undercover operations or, most of the people are dead. But the American public has a right to know whether this heroic freedom fighter, Nelson Mandela, was arrested and then served 27 plus years in prison, whether the United States played a role in that arrest. Our tax money would have gone to that arrest. The arrest would have happened with officials whose salaries we paid. And at this late date in the year 2013, with the President Obama who claims to be concerned about transparency, the American public has a right to know whether their government played a role in the arrest of Mandela. We have a right to see all of the CIA's files.
Now, if you obtain more than enough online support during the petition drive, and the CIA doesn't comply with your organization's request, are other options being considered to pressure the government to turn over the documents?
Yeah, we've just begun our campaign. We started December 11th on rootsaction.org. Anyone can go there and sign the petition. It's one word, rootsaction.org. We immediately got 15,000 signatures. The signatures went to the White House, as did copies went to all the members of Congress. So when people sign the petition and they put in their zip code, we not only send it to the White House, the email also goes to the members of Congress. So if the petition doesn't work, we may consider getting members of Congress on our side. We're thinking about approaching, for example, the Congressional Black Caucus. And there's no reason why we can't get celebrities, people who are well known, to endorse this simple call that the CIA reveal the files. I mean, maybe all of these reports in the Johannesburg Daily, in the Cox News Service, which is connected to the Atlanta Journal, Newsweek, maybe all these reports have been wrong, but they're quoting good sources. They're quoting high-level CIA and South African intelligence sources. And the way to put an end to the mystery is for the CIA to release its files, and President Obama certainly has the power to order that to happen. The names I've heard are the CIA officials that were involved. One of them was a guy named Millard Shirley. He later went to work as a private contractor with South African intelligence, spying on the international boycott against the apartheid regime. And then there was a fellow named Gerard Moody, who was high-level South African intelligence, who said he heard the story immediately that the CIA had played a role in tipping off the South African authorities as to where Mandela would be and how he would be disguised. So the American public has a right to know whether our own government played a role in the 27-year imprisonment of the freedom fighter Nelson Mandela. It's that simple.
Are you in the least bit surprised that most of the mainstream news sources, ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, really didn't touch this at all?
No, it's stunning. I mean, I was watching mainstream news, as probably most people that are anti-racist and African Americans. I'm sure people were glued to the television screen when this freedom fighter passed away, and it was wall-to-wall coverage. There was virtually no mention of the CIA's role. I heard on all the news networks about the prison guards who were decent, about the prison guards who were cruel. I heard over and over about the 27 years plus that Mandela played in prison, how he wouldn't buckle, how all he had to do was get out of prison was to say, all right, we're calling off the armed struggle. He refused to do it. I heard all of those details, and they should have been reported. But I didn't hear that the United States might have played a role in his capture, which is not a tiny matter. It's not a tiny footnote. In the past, CBS News had done a good report even back in 1986. But in the wall-to-wall coverage, I saw no mention on television, except when some guests brought it up. Like Democracy Now! Host Amy Goodman was on MSNBC, and she brought it up. And there was another guest on, I think with Melissa Harris Perry's show, and the guest brought it up. So, there were guests who brought it up, but I wasn't seeing a lot of hosts or correspondents bringing this up in the wall-to-wall coverage we had of Mandela's memorial. So it's a little bit, the New York Times had a passing reference to it from Bill Keller, the former executive editor of the New York Times, but it's a travesty. And if people are interested in how badly the mainstream media performed in the last week or so on this issue of whether the CIA had a material essential role in the imprisonment of Mandela, a good critique of the mainstream media can be found on the website of the Media Watch group I launched years ago, which is called FAIR, F-A-I-R, and their website is simply fair.org. And FAIR has been all over this story literally for decades. And they recently wrote a report that should be near the top of their website about how badly the mainstream media performed in not bringing this issue up at least once in a while. If the CIA played an essential role in Mandela's capture, that's a big story. It's not the only story. It's not the only story revolving around this hero Mandela and his passing away, but it should have been mentioned, at least day by day somewhere. And again, these news agencies have huge resources. And imagine if these news agencies, these powerful corporate news outlets, imagine if they started petitioning to see these files, how it might help the cause. But as we know, Gary, mainstream media on a lot of these issues of CIA abuse and misconduct, the mainstream media is often more of an accomplice with CIA or military abuse than they are an exposer of wrongdoing.
And in terms of trying to obtain these files, what would you say, or what would your response be to those who would say, oh, that was so many years ago, the past is the past, the man is dead, he's been honored, he's recognized as a saint, there's no need to pursue this? How would you respond to those arguments?
I haven't heard those arguments, but I've heard them in other contexts. I haven't heard them in relation to Mandela, but my response would be very simple. That if we can't uncover the CIA and FBI crimes of the past, we will never prevent new crimes from happening today or tomorrow. I spent years on the case of Martin Luther King's assassination and the FBI's harassment of King. And because we unearthed those files, because the whole world knows what the FBI did to Martin Luther King and other civil rights leaders, we know it's an antidote, a preventative that might prevent the FBI from committing crimes today or tomorrow. The fact that all of that has been aired. And the same thing with the CIA. The CIA is involved in deeds around the world today. And we need to know what they did yesterday. We need to know what they're doing today. And all of this information about past misdeeds of these federal agencies, it helps us to understand what the agencies are doing currently. We know the CIA has played a role in the execution or arrest of many freedom fighters around the world, including Patrice Lumumba. So it's not ancient history. When we learn about what this agency did yesterday, it helps us understand what it might be doing today and tomorrow.
And once again, how can people get involved with your current campaign?
They should go to the website rootsaction.org. Rootsaction is one word, rootsaction.org, and you could sign that petition. And again, you don't need Roots Action. You could contact your own member of Congress and ask them to join this call. Members of Congress should be speaking out loudly and clearly that they want to see all CIA files relating to Mandela. And let's remember that the African National Congress, this group that fought for freedom in South Africa, led by Mandela, before he was put in prison and while he was in prison and when he got out of prison, that the African National Congress was called a terrorist organization by the United States State Department all through the Reagan era. So into the mid-'80s, this was considered a terrorist group. So I encourage people to contact their members of Congress and ask their members of Congress to demand that the CIA files be released, and ask their members of Congress to lean on President Obama to get these files released. And if you want to join the collective effort, that's at rootsaction.org.
It's been a pleasure having you on the show, Mr. Cohen, and I appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Thank you so much.
Source links for this episode and story have been posted below for those interested in obtaining more information. In addition, I'll be contacting the Central Intelligence Agency to obtain comments about its involvement in Nelson Mandela's arrest and to inquire about releasing any or all documents pertaining to the case. I'll report on the outcome in an upcoming episode. I'm the G-Man, and I thank you for tuning in. Until next time, stay cool, stay safe, and stay informed.